my candidacy, my campaign for Miss Juneteenth 2021. Super excited for this. Thank you, thank you. That was a dollar store joke. But anyways, okay, so back, thank you. So to Channing, let's start, I suppose, from the beginning, from you being from the south side of Fort Worth, how it was like. I know that you initially, before you became a filmmaker, you were an actress or you want to pursue a career in acting. And I want to know if there was something about the Fort Worth community that kind of cultivated that sense of creativity and that passion in you.
Yeah, just to warn everybody, I've warned our wonderful host beforehand, but I have an almost 2-year-old daughter. So you may hear her in the background, or if you've been on other panels with me, you probably already heard her. But so I'm from Fort Worth, which, if people aren't familiar, it's close to Dallas, which is a huge city. But, I think people don't think of Fort Worth necessarily as a huge city. It's actually the 13th largest city in the US. But the film feels, I think, more like, if you've seen the film already, it feels more like, a small country town, because the side of, I grew up on the south side of Fort Worth, and the side of town that I grew up on was more a close-knit African-American community. And so I really grew up with those images, I think, in my head, and really formed my ideas about community and what community was. And for me, I saw it with this sense of beauty, but also with, I thought the people carried themselves with a sense of dignity, but also had this grit about them. And so, that comes out in my work, I think, in a lot of ways. And I think that it also extends to, the way I see things visually, and informs, that was the way I spoke to many of the creative collaborators, just was about the beauty and dignity of the community. And I wanted everything to have a sense of grit.
Interesting. Yeah. And I noticed that, obviously it's very clear in Miss Juneteenth. You can sense that sense of grit just from Wayman's, the bar that Turquoise works at. And I also noticed in actually some of your shorts that you've done as well, like in Red and in the Dorothea's Blues, there's this kind of underlying theme of grieving and motherhood. And I also noticed one of them was about funeral homes as well. And I was interested in that, those all three that are have been in your shorts, and how that also kind of played a role in Miss Juneteenth as well. I wonder how that played a role from Fort Worth and your community into your work in the past.
It's a good question, because I think, I was talking about how the community really informed, I think, my ideas about community. And so much, one of the things I think I didn't say about this community in particular was, at one point it was, a community that was like, it was a bustling community for like Black commerce and like Black businesses. So there was a Black doctor on this side of town, and Black teachers lived in this area and everything. And like today, it really, the businesses that remain are businesses that have been passed down through generations that, families have committed to hold on to. So they're legacy businesses in a way.
Right.
And the area itself has been gentrified, is being actively gentrified. I'm sorry. So, people are holding on to these businesses with a sense of pride. And like the funeral home that you see in the movie it's actually family friends on that funeral home. It's called Baker Funeral Home. That's the actual name of it. And I grew up, in the community I grew up in, you had aunts and uncles and grannies who necessarily weren't your blood, aunts and uncles, but they were like family. And so that's who the Bakers were to me. So like I grew up, I know now that it's different, but growing up, like death to me was like not, it was a big deal, but it was also, not scary, because I saw the Bakers treat people with a sense of dignity and, with a sense of pride, in which they took care of people when they came to them. It was this community way, and I think that now today, it obviously, I see, like, literally, I think one of my professors joked one time that I have, some kind of funeral in every, you know, movie in some
Mm-hmm.
way, or
Mm-hmm.
funeral home, but it was just so much a part of my childhood. And I'm grateful in a way because I think just even when I go back to the funeral home, even in, you know, thinking about the film, even in Tech Scouts and everything, I would still see them treat people with the same tenderness. And that had a big impact on me, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that you touch on it so beautifully. And I think that says a lot also about your way of telling stories. But before we get into Miss Juneteenth and all that, I'm curious to know more about you going to Baylor, because I know you went to Baylor University in Texas and you studied acting or you studied theater. And then you ended up ultimately going to USC to become a filmmaker. So I'm curious to know what happened. Why did you choose to stop acting and go into filmmaking?
Well, I don't think I ever stopped acting. You know, that's not something that I've put on
Mm-hmm.
the shelf. It's just when I went to film school, it's so all consuming
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
I really needed to focus on, you know, my work as a filmmaker, and there was so much to learn. And, you know, I actually was in my thesis film um, at USC. And I think for me, you know, wanting to be back behind the camera really was wanting to, you know, really focus on everything that was in front of me. And
Mm-hmm.
I studied theater at Baylor. And I think my ideas were definitely, I decided at one point, I think early on, that I was, you know, going to be an actor, but that was, I think, about access, because growing up in this community in particular, like I had no designs to be a filmmaker at an early age, like,
Right.
but I loved acting and I loved story. And I think I loved acting because that's what I saw out front, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And what I had access to was a small community theater in my neighborhood. It was called Sojourner Truth Theater, coincidentally.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But my
Shout out to
mom
the youth.
would take us to that theater. And, you know, I realized today how big of an impact it had, because I got to see like these really complex Black plays, you know, that I can't even imagine as a kid, you know, seeing now, but I got to see like Pearly and like For Colored Girls and things like that. And I
Right.
also got to see like, this will be, you know, hopefully this will blow everybody's mind, but because it still blows mine, but I got to see, you know, these really great actors that would come through this community theater. Like I literally have a childhood picture with Ruby Dee and Ossie Davis. And yes, I'm bragging about this.
As you should, literally as you should. The actual, some of the greatest. Like,
I just
that's
can't
wild.
believe it, you know, but as a kid, it's like, you don't understand the magnitude of these things and what impact they'll have on you long term. But I think it really created a space for me to want to see Black people in really complex roles, and in particular, you know, Black women leads. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that really kind of awakened in me this need to want to, you know, tell stories. And I think acting looked accessible to me, and I just didn't understand everything else, you know, that
Yeah.
would come later,
Yeah.
after college, actually.
Right. And that's interesting too, because I feel as though like learning every like single part of the craft, whether or not it's acting or screenwriting or directing or even knowing how to hold a camera, that's all super important. Like it gives you that context as to how to frame people or how to direct people or how you would want to be directed. So that's cool. And then when you were in film school, I know you met the co-producer, the producer of Miss Juneteenth, that also happens to be your husband. But I want to know, there's always a back and forth about whether or not it's worth going to film school as a filmmaker, the pros and cons. But for you, how was it beneficial for you going to USC and becoming a filmmaker?
It was worth it to me, you know, and I know that people that there is an argument about me. I hope this is going to be weird. Y'all have to walk with me so I can cut off trolls in the background.
Oh, yeah.
I told y'all what we're up against.
We're listening. We're here.
But basically, you know, and I know people talk about whether or not they should go to film school, and people have asked me, you know, but I think totally an individual preference. Y'all are seeing my great grandparents in the background. Sorry.
No,
I don't even know how to
I love
cut
it.
this thing off. Okay.
Hi,
Maybe we
great
can't get it
grandparents.
off. Hi, great grandparents. All right. Okay, maybe I can get it off. Thank you. I'm sorry, y'all. There we go.
Oh, no worries
Um,
at all.
I think that, and it's an individual preference. I think you have to decide like what, you know, how do I say this the best way? I mean, for me, like I mentioned that I had come from community theater. Like I had no technical acumen. Like I really had, maybe I'd pick the camera up. Can y'all hear me and see me okay?
Yeah. Yeah, I
Okay,
think
I
it's
just want
like,
to make
yeah.
sure I wasn't frozen. It said my internet. Okay. All right. It should be good now because I'm not moving around. I'm sorry, y'all.
Yeah, it's good.
So for me, I had, my background was in community theater and no technical acumen or anything like that. But what happened to me was I'd gone into Los Angeles after college because I was going to, try my hand at acting. And I dipped my toe in, not my
Mm-hmm.
whole foot, but I dipped my toe in and started kind of seeing what was out there. And it didn't really match, the stories that I saw in my head, the roles that I was seeing were available,
Right.
especially for Black women. So I coincidentally did a USC thesis film as an actor. And it was an awakening for me in a way because it made film look accessible because like I saw this like small crew come together and like they were all working really hard, on this person's vision and this person's idea to create this story. And it was like it was a thesis, so it wasn't like, it was more than just like a lighting kit and stuff like that, but it was small enough where I was just like, wow, maybe this is something that I could do. And I already had these stories in my heart, and I was always doing, writing little things down. I was doing poetry and little short stories, plays, whatever, to kind of keep creating story, but I had no idea how to, write screenplays. And so I don't know, I kind of remember what that moment is, but I just said, well, I'll just apply to SC, I know it's like a shot in the dark or whatever. And if I get in, I'll do it. If I don't get in, I'll go back to Texas and maybe I would have, continued to make films. Or I would have continued to, or tried, found a way into film. I don't know. But for me, I'm glad that I went to film school because it gave me the space to focus on cinema for X amount of years, and to really, I discovered things at film school. Like I had a professor who sat down with me and like literally like basic things that sat down with me and went through final draft and was like, how, this is how you do this. And, here's some shortcuts and things like that, and I had classes where I could go in the directing classes and really focus on my work with actors. And I had a professor say, you should focus on directing. Like that was an awakening for me, but I know it's not for everybody. And I know that there's so many ways into it. It was just, I had a good experience at film school.
Got it. And did you develop Miss Juneteenth when you're in film school, or was it an idea that you'd always had since you were a little girl, or was it when you got to Austin Film Society postgraduate? When did that develop?
It was, I started developing it after film school. So, but, I say that the idea was with me my whole life just because Juneteenth was such a fabric of my life, and Miss June, I had such an admiration for Miss Juneteenth in particular,
Right.
as a pageant, just because, it was formative, like it's something that I went to every year. And it was confidence building for me. Like I was a young Black girl in Fort Worth, Texas. And it blows my mind now that I got to see that. Like I could go every year and see all these young Black women on stage,
Right.
And I've noted in interviews and stuff, and I think even in my director statement, but what was so groundbreaking for me was that they were so hopeful and excited about the future.
Right.
So I think that was just so much a part of like my formative years that it kind of found its way out when I was thinking about ideas for a feature.
Right. Okay. So it was always in you and you were developing it, and then you started writing Miss Juneteenth. Like what really got you to fully start writing? Like maybe it was after the shorts that you were writing, or was it, or how did that kind of all start picking up and you were like, okay, I'm going to actually start my first feature?
I mean, I had done, Neil and I, who you mentioned earlier, we met at film school, and we initially, we connected. And that's another thing that I should say about film school, that I feel like I gained relationships with collaborators at film school, Neil in particular, because we connected over, both of us, he was from North Carolina, I was from Texas, and we both discovered that we wanted to make these films about Black folks in the South, you know, that highlighted, you know, history and culture. You know, we bonded over that and started working together, you know, on my thesis first and then his thesis, but we created a partnership. And what I found in that was that that was such an important relationship for me professionally, because he was my trusted person. Like, I could go to him and say, I'm thinking about this. And, you know, I could trust him to like not change the direction of the story that I had in my heart initially, but still be able to give critical notes. So that was important for me. And I completely forgot the question, but I hope that that was relevant.
No, that's beautiful. And I mean, I'm a sucker for like a love story, and a love story plus like a productive union. I mean, we love to hear that.
Rolling his eyes.
Oh my gosh. Hi, Neil. Well, I wanted to switch gears a bit and talk about, before we again get into all of Miss Juneteenth, your experience at Austin Film Society, because I know you were mentored by Charles Burnett, which is huge. And I want to hear about your experience there, being mentored by him, and what are your biggest takeaways from being under all these different people?
Yeah, I have to like, I still get, you know, tongue tied about it. And that's probably how I was around him. So he probably does not have much to say about me.
Stop. We don't know this. We don't know this.
I don't care. I was in his presence. I'll take it, you know, like, he's a master. So there's not much I could say. I just was like trying to soak up any, you know, of his atmosphere that I could, you know. One of my greatest memories was like, sitting there and like Richard Linklater, who is incredible and means so much to me, because like he founded the Austin Film Society and has just done so much to support Texas filmmakers. And he, like, Linklater gave me notes on this movie, I can say that too. And like, so anyway, we were there at Linklater's, and he has these animals, and like I just remember, you know, I don't even remember all the notes and everything. I just remember standing next to Charles Burnett and like looking out over, I think it was like pigs and chickens or something. I don't even remember. I just know.
I'm screaming.
I just know it was a surreal moment where I was just like, I'm standing next to Charles Burnett.
No, that's unreal.
But he's someone that's absolutely been an influence, you know. Like I can remember in film school, like sitting there painstakingly screenshotting every frame of Killer of Sheep, just because like his composition is so incredible. And like one of my favorite films of his is My Brother's Wedding. I don't know if people have seen that. If you all have, I'd love to talk about it someday. But he's just wonderful, and he has this way of, you know, just capturing Black life with such sensitivity, you know, and it's so poetic. And so he's just someone I've admired for so long and just felt lucky to be in his presence. So thank you, Linklater, for founding AFS. And does everybody know Holly from AFS? She's incredible, but I have to shout her out too.
Okay, shout out Holly, shout out Linklater, shout out Charles. And I feel like that was also, I can see those influences as well in Miss Juneteenth, just with the different frames. There's a sensitivity between not only Turk and Kai, you know, the mother and daughter, but just within everyone within this community. I'm like jumping back and forth, but I am curious to know how you kind of created the color palette and like the different scenes, if there was any inspiration that you had behind that, and how you communicated it to the cinematographer.
I mean, it was funny because like I was talking about earlier, you know, how I was just describing the world in the way that I described the world to each of my collaborators. And when they, you know, my production designer came down earlier, shout out to Olivia Peoples. We are not cousins, but hey.
Hilarious. People solidarity, that's important.
But you know, but we literally, I have these, what I'll do even when I start conceiving of a project is really like, you know, they're visuals that really move me, you know, even in the writing process that I'll just, start pulling down visuals, and I always feel inspired by the visuals. So, I have books, I have them near me. I don't want to embarrass myself because they're not very organized, but, I'll send, I'm sorry, you go ahead.
Oh no, I was saying like, I don't think you'd be embarrassed. I feel like it would be really cool, but it's whatever you're comfortable with.
I'll get them. I'm just, I tried this when I was talking to Bam, and I'm just like flipping through a bunch of plastic pages.
I feel that. No, I feel that.
But basically, like, and when I mean visuals, I'm not just talking about from films and things like that. I'm talking about visuals from different photographers, from everyday folks on the street. I just am constantly trying to find a way to get into the world and, to be able to, talk to creative collaborators, like, this is what I'm feeling, and I think with Miss Juneteenth is interesting because to see it now, because I always had this really idea about the tone, it would be, I wanted it to be poetic. And it's interesting because we had done a mood reel for the film like a few years ago. And like, I go back and I look at the mood reel and I'm like, wow, that's, very, very close to what I wanted. So I think instinctually, as a filmmaker, for me, there were things that I had in my heart that later, made their way up to my head, And so I was really happy about that. But I think visually, I'm just constantly, I keep my books, just so that I can talk to creative collaborators. And I've talked a lot about the world.
Right.
People have seen the film now. I think if you haven't, I'm giving away stuff. But I was talking about earlier this community and, how it's being gentrified now and how, there's got these legacy businesses. So I really feel like it's like this really lived in community. And the way I described it to my creative collaborators is that everything should feel like it's slightly past its expiration date, just because people are literally holding on to the things that they have, and there's a timelessness to the community. So that's just how I was able to kind of inform about visuals. I'm going to sneak over and grab these little books so I can show you.
Ooh, sneak peek, y'all. Get excited.
I mean, they're so like poorly done right now. But just like, I don't know if you can see anything, but these are like actual people from the world, just like that cowboy culture kind of thing. Some of these will be funny, but like some of these are my friends, like I'll just pull stuff off Facebook and things like that. But I'm like talking to the creative collaborators about the world. And then some of these are just hard to see. See, I'm embarrassing myself again.
Oh no, I'm seeing it. I'm feeling it.
See, these are listed by like location, broken down by location, but kind of see like their different visuals, which the way that but that's just the way that I'm kind of connecting with the collaborators and saying I wanted to, I speak more about feeling really than look initially. I'm like, I wanted to feel like this. It doesn't have to, the composition doesn't have to match this specifically. The visuals don't have to match it, but I wanted to feel like this. But like we even went to early Juneteenth parades and like grabbed pictures of like the girls, like,
yes.
And so that's just the way that I was able, especially the way we were shooting the parade in particular, which we were shooting that, almost doc style, we were like out there just having to capture an existing parade. But I had been to the parade so many times and I had all the visuals down and I was like, these are the things that I want to try and grab, these are the things that I want to see. So,
right.
I'm sorry if that's not helpful, y'all. I wish I had this. I'm going to do a better job of getting these like on a PowerPoint or something.
No, I'm learning so much. I'm speaking on behalf of everybody else. But the parade also, I heard that you co-opted the 4th of July parade from last year.
Isn't that funny?
That's so creative.
Yeah, so we shot in 2 communities, the south side of Fort Worth, which is a historically Black community, but also shot in there's a community in Fort Worth called Como. Okay, it's not the same as Como, Texas, because that's different, but it's the neighborhood's called Como. And so they have this huge 4th of July parade every year except this year. And it's if I didn't mention that, it's a historically Black community and people come from all over. And so, you know, they were just so amazing to let us come in and make July 4th Juneteenth. But
I
yes,
feel like Juneteenth is the new July 4th, if we're being honest. So I'm into this switch.
yeah, I mean, it was interesting how that happened, you know, that people were
Yeah.
talking about, you know, we're celebrating Juneteenth, you know, this year. And maybe people still celebrated July 4th. I'm not sure, but
Mm-hmm.
we turned July 4th into Juneteenth last year.
I love it. I love it. And going back to the authenticity that you brought into the film, I'm curious because when you left USC, you had gone back to Texas, and I noticed as well, like David Lowery, and there were some other producers that were all Texan producers. Did you feel as though that was a big selling point because you were trying to stick to your roots going to Fort Worth? Like, what do you think really got this film, you know, in front of really big producers and like was able to take off?
I think what happened is, like, I really had written this film that was accessible, you know, like Neil and I were going to shoot it anyway. Like Neil, I heard him in an interview say, so I'm going to steal this, but we were going to shoot on an iPhone or 7D or whatever. And it's true.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I remember us
Little
like,
Sean Baker.
yes, I remember us like buying a 7D, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But what happened is Neil was like, okay, well, we want the film to be the, you know, best we can. So we started submitting it to different development programs, and went through several programs. Like you mentioned AFS, we went through San Francisco Film, we went through IFP, whoop, whoop.
Shout out, shout out.
We went through Sundance Institute, and, you know, I hope I'm not forgetting anybody. Please forgive me if I am, but it really helped us, you know, start to gain traction on the film. And, you know, our idea was whether we got in or not, we would be able to ask people for notes. You know, we also submitted it to several competitions.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was helpful because it, you know, it started getting us in environments that are meant to protect the integrity of the story and the artist.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that I'll still hold on to going forward, is like, you know, whatever it was instinctually that made me really want to dive into this story and tell this story, that's the part that I want to hold on to no matter what.
Right. And yeah, and I mean, I feel like that's really strong when you're looking, especially at the main characters, Turk and Kai, this idea of motherhood and Black motherhood, which is also something that can be kind of sensitive. And I think you tackled it really beautifully in the film. But it's worth noting that you had also been a new mom as you'd been filming, right, with your little now 2-year-old. So how did that affect development? Did it affect development? Did you change the script once you became a new mother, or did it affect production?
It definitely affected developing the scripts. The script itself didn't change a whole lot. There were scenes that I did go back in, and there's some that I took away and some that I added, because I think what happened is, you know, we really were, every year was like, we're going to shoot the film this year, you know, we're going to shoot the film this year. And then something would happen that would push the film forward, you know, and it was like, okay, well, maybe we, you know, take our time a little bit and shoot the film next year. And then, you know, right around the time that I found out that we were getting the financing to make the film, I found out I was pregnant, of course.
Mm-hmm.
So we didn't shoot the film that summer because my daughter was due literally right around the time we would have started.
Mm-hmm.
But so she literally turned 1 on set. And I'm really so grateful for the experience, because partially because, you know, I have this incredible little baby girl now who's like really the light of my life, truly, like, she really is. But the other thing was, I think it changed the way that I viewed the film, because I really had on paper this tough love version of Turquoise, because, you know, my mom had been single for much of my life, you know, so I think I really wrote the script, even though I was always writing from Turquoise's perspective. Mm-hmm. I wrote it in life as a daughter who had viewed her mother, you know. Mm-hmm. In many ways. My mom will kill me because it's not completely about her. So let me make that clear. But
disclaimer.
just the mothers and daughters part of it. You know, I wrote it as a daughter. And then when I became a mom, you know, one of the things that I don't think that I grasped early on was this sense of connection between Turquoise and Kai, you know, the sense of joy between them that I discovered after I became a mom with my daughter. And I had this little, and it was like the irony of me having a daughter, it was not lost on me either, because as soon as she was born, like I've always been kind of this rough and tumble kind of Texas girl, you know, hop in the car, drive back to California, drive back here by myself, whatever, you know. But as soon as I had this baby, like all that went out the window for her, at least, because I was just like, I wanted to hold her and protect her. I never wanted her feet to touch the ground, you know. I was like, oh, like this is what it is to like want the best for another human being, you know, and want to protect another human being and want the best for this, you know, another human being's life, you know, and want to protect them. So that was the way that that definitely changed story-wise, I think a little bit, but definitely in the direction, because I was constantly saying is, you know, especially to Turquoise and Kai, Nicole and Alexis, you know, whatever we do, we have to find the joy between them.
Right. Yeah. And Alexis Chikezi. Chikezi. My mom's, I'm Nigerian, so if I butcher that, my mom's, hopefully she doesn't hear me, but
you didn't. I've got her to clarify for me. I get everybody to clarify names for me. So.
Right? Yeah, you gotta ask. But I mean, they're both so strong in the film. I mean, Alexis she's a Texan girl, yeah? Like she is a new actress, right? And
first feature, yeah.
Oh my God. And that was wild seeing her. And then Nicole, like unreal. Her presence on camera, like even the things that she does with her mouth, like it's so Shakespearean, like all of the emotion that she holds in. And I'm curious to hear more about the casting, because a lot of the people who were in the cast were new actors, or at least actors from the area. And then
I mean, that's cool. That's the cool thing about it. Like, so Neil, who I mentioned earlier, who happens to be my husband, was one of the producers, but was one of the producers. And like I said, he's been on through the entirety of the film, you know, like he was there giving notes from my first draft, which was so different, you know. But we later partnered with Saidah Bear, who they're from the Dallas-Fort Worth area. You mentioned earlier is David Lowry, Toby Hall Brooks, and James Johnston. And they make films, you know, both large and small. So we connected with James Johnston. Sundance connected us, and we sat down with James and you know, talked about the film and everything. And he later decided he wanted to produce it, which was great, because I think that moved the film further along as well. And then Leyline is the financier, and Saidah Bear had done, I know at least one film with Leyline at that point, you know, maybe more than one. I don't want to misquote that, but they, you know, connected us to Leyline, the financing, and then we were able to move the film forward. But anyway, about the casting. Leyline greenlit the film without saying you have to have like a particular cast, you know?
Right.
And now I know that that's a gift, you know, because a lot of times that just doesn't happen. Like I was able to find actors that I felt were right for these particular roles. And I also was at one point in the casting, you know, like coming from a theater background and also, you know, wanting the films to be as authentic as possible. It was so important to me to actually see people in these roles, you know, and I know there's this thing about offer only, and that's something that I, you know, I was learning about too, and in consideration of, but I got to a place where I was just like, you know, I just have to make sure that, you know, whoever walks in these roles, it's just important for me, you know. And I got to see Nicole read for Turquoise, and it was just, and I already was familiar with her work. it was just, I needed to see, you know, I needed to see people be able to kind of navigate this emotional journey that we see Turquoise in the film. And I also knew that I'm a director that likes people to be able to sit in moments, and, you know, I discover things as they're discovering things. And
Mm-hmm.
when I saw her read, you know, I was just so excited by it, because she's someone who can bring that kind of nuance to roles and, you know, say so much just with the look, you know, and that's really, really what I wanted for Turquoise, because there's, you know, there's often, you know, there's things that she's navigating internally that we just need to be able to see on her face. So that's how that casting happened. And then Alexis, who, you know, blew me away and redefined, you know, my thoughts about directing. Because like with Nicole, you know, Nicole's Juilliard trained, and because I have a
Mm-hmm.
theater background, like I like to work with people who have, you know, lots of training if possible, lots of experience if possible, that kind of thing. So with Alexis, you know, this being her first film, I was just like, oh my goodness, like she was so wonderful in auditions. Like she was someone who I just wanted to reach out to. So I knew, you know, she had it. I was just more concerned about, okay, can I bring that out in her? You know, it's my
Right.
first feature, and, you know, I'm just so used to like um, working with people with like tons of experience and everything. But we sat down before we shot, and I went through the script with her and talked to her about just like tone and, you know, my ideas for the film and how I wanted to approach the film. And as a director, I have a really naturalistic approach to
Mm-hmm.
acting. And I wanted everybody to be as human, you know, as just as human as possible. That's what we need. Like we need to have real conversations, you know. Even with the sound people, I was like, we're not going to project over here. So we just, you know, we're going to have actual normal conversations. And she just jumped in and was just incredible and like super hardworking and super earnest and asked lots of
Mm-hmm.
questions. And I'm just so happy we found her. I think Kendrick Sampson is another person who I saw in the role, who I was like super excited by, you know, who brought
Mm-hmm.
the nuance in his read. Um, and then there are so many local, and I don't even want to call them local actors, because I think, you know, that in of itself, you know, minimizes who they are. Like there's so many incredible actors who happen to live locally, like Liz Michael, who plays Betty Ray, who I'm just crazy about, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then the mother, Charlotte, is played by this woman named Lori Hayes, who came in the audition and like knocked me off my feet, because she's an actor who just took the role and made it her own. Like she came in and I was not expecting this kind of read, or my idea of who the role was, you know, was
Mm-hmm.
completely different. And she comes in like this really like, um, she's like this dignified, classy woman, but you could just feel like there's something slightly off, you know, kilter. And that's something that she came up with outside of the room and brought it into the room herself. And I was
Right.
just, wow, you know,
Oh my
like
God.
blew me away. And then Marcus Malden, who plays Wayman, the owner of the bar, you know, is another actor who lives locally, and he's incredible. And then we just took, you know, all these folks and surrounded them with community people, which was super
Right.
important to me, because the spaces that I was capturing, they really are about the people that inhabit them. So it was
Mm-hmm.
important for me to have the community in the film.
Right. Right. And before I go more into how you added a lot of authenticity to their performances, could you explain to people in the audience maybe what for offer, like for your consideration or offer only, what that might mean when it comes to casting?
Yeah, and I mean it, and I'm you know, I was learning the different nuances as I went along, but offer only is, you know, you have actors and who are, you know, you can go to their agent and their agent may say, you know, this particular actor won't read for the role, but you can offer them the role. And a lot of times that is wonderful, you know, and that is gives you access to more people and things like that. And it's really a wonderful thing, because, you know, people's body of work is just in particular for these particular roles. You know, I was looking for, you know, it was such a personal film, and it's such a specific film about a specific place. And so I really needed to see people in the role.
Right. Okay. Thank you for explaining that. And Yeah, so back to the casting and the people in the film. It's funny because when I watched it originally on Juneteenth, I didn't realize, I think for about a week later, that I don't think I saw a single white person like in the film. And I was really personally impressed by myself because I was like, huh, like it just didn't even really occur to me. But I think it also says a lot to the film because it's not like satirical, it's not parodying like what it is to be Black, you know, these are just people living their lives. But did you find that you felt this certain responsibility with an all Black everything, and maybe that responsibility came from directing, but also when you were pitching it? Also, there might have been a white person. I don't know. I
I think
didn't notice.
I think there were a couple maybe, but it was so much about this particular community that, as I mentioned, is a Black community in this particular place. And for me, when I go back, I keep using the word authenticity, but it was important for me to be able to authentically portray the community. Like if I had any nerves really after, it wasn't about the reviews, it was about the community itself seeing themselves, and
Right.
feeling respected and feeling proud of their portrayal. So yeah, I had nerves about that for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I, I'm not even, were you asking me that? But I'm not even sure if you asked me that in particular, but I'm just feeling,
Yeah. Yeah. No, of course. Yeah.
no,
That's good.
so many of the people there were my personal friends, in the
Mhm.
film. And it was just important that they felt respected.
Yeah, definitely. That's cool. And then, did you feel as though there were people behind the scenes, any decision makers that really helped this come afloat, that you feel like that it might not have come above otherwise because it was all Black, or because it felt so specific, because it is a very like Black Fort Worth
Mhm.
specific tradition, you know what I mean? I don't know if you had any people behind the scenes that you think really helped that.
What do you mean, like decision makers, like on the producing side, or
Yeah, I read somewhere there was an African American executive named Teresa.
Teresa Steele Page? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And like just people like that who, are able to kind of lift that story up and make sure that it's actually being seen
Yeah.
by a big audience.
I mean, Teresa in particular, like, she greenlit the film, but she's also someone, not, she wasn't just the person who said, okay, go, but she was the person that when we were finding the beginning of the film, I knew that I wanted Lift Every Voice and Sing to begin the film just because it's so much a part of the way Juneteenth begins.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Somebody will get up there and sing Lift Every Voice and Sing, and then Juneteenth can start.
Right.
And so when I was finding it, there were ways that I was just, we were playing with it with the composer. Okay, maybe the composer puts music to it, or, you know, um, maybe there's a trio of singers, whatever, or, maybe we don't have it there. Maybe there's we just bring in the
Mm-hmm.
score there, right? And
Right,
it
right.
was like, no, it stays. And
Mm-hmm.
so there was definitely, little moments like that I think pushed the film forward. But I think just as there's people that were on the producing side, and she's a producer on the film as well, Teresa. Um, but there were also people, I think, that pushed the film forward in the community. Like we talked earlier about the July 4th parade that we repurposed to Juneteenth.
Mm-hmm.
There's a man in the community named Estrus Tucker. And he's from that historical community called Como. And he's another person who was just like, opened the door and was like, okay, because I mean that parade is like really organized. Like they have it down
Mm-hmm.
to science. You don't just hop in there and
Right.
and so he just brought us in and was like, we were at all the community meetings, like
Mm-hmm.
planning it out with them and everything. So um, there's so many people I can't even name. Like I'm thinking even about I don't know if y'all remember this scene in the Juneteenth Museum where there's a man that's walking them through talking about the history of the museum. And that's the actual, curator of the museum
Oh, that's
that
awesome.
so there was just so many things, moments and that I feel like are serendipitous now that really helped us further along with the authenticity of the film.
Right. All right. Well, okay, we have about maybe 10 minutes left until we're going to open up to the Q&As, but I'd be remiss to not bring up Sundance and, you know, that whole process of just even getting into Sundance. I mean, a lot has happened before, like between January and now being a certified fresh Rotten Tomatoes film. So, I mean, which is so huge, but I just want to hear more about that process of going to Sundance. Did you have a sales agent when you were there? Did you find a distributor there? Did you have to wait a bit? Like, what was running through your head?
Yeah, I wish Neil was here to talk about that because I'm so bad at talking about this. But Sunday, I can talk about the Sundance part.
Mm-hmm.
It was like really incredible, you know, like, and I hate to say it, like it was unexpected, you know, like even though we had gone through the Sundance Institute and things like that, like I'd gone through the intensives, like they have these kind of you know, smaller intensives that are meant to like reach more folks, more diverse voices, I think. And so I'd gone through the screenwriting intensive and their director intensive, and then Neil had gone through the creative producing lab in 2017 as a producer.
Mm-hmm.
And they'd been really supportive of us, but you just don't know. So, and also, you know, it's my first feature, and I was excited about the film, you know, but you never know how the film's going to be received.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we were making this, I feel like this, you know, quieter, more reflective film about Black life. So but what I didn't know was I had to stay true to myself no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I didn't know. So we sent it off, and of course there's all the nerves and everything, but I'm really good at like sending stuff off and then just kind of blocking it out of my head, you know,
Right.
and kind of ignoring all the things around me.
I need to be better at that. So taking notes, taking mental notes.
But you know, I for so long, I probably could have ignored it for so long, you know. But anyway, when they reached out and you know, I got the call that I initially missed and then got a text call back. It was just, you know, I couldn't do anything but just like cry when they told me. So, you know, Neil had to call him back later and get all the details and everything. But I was just so overwhelmed by it. And it was really incredible, especially after going through the Sundance Institute, to be able to premiere there. And in competition, it was just like a dream come true, you know. So I went there and I was absolutely overwhelmed and elated and excited and all those things at all the same time. And then I spent the premiere mostly in the green room with my darling daughter, because everybody else was like, we're going to the premiere, we're sorry.
Oh my gosh.
So I came back to Q&A, but I had seen the film many times.
That's true, you have.
But I came back with the Q&A, and it was really great, you know, and really great to be able to connect with people. And I think, you know, many of our people that are still championing the film, you know, now, we, you know, saw the film at Sundance and have been really great about amplifying it. So it was wonderful.
It's wonderful. And also shout out to Zora for making it to Sundance before me as a 1-year-old.
Zora has been so many film festivals that I've been trying to go to for years. So don't worry.
Zora's gonna mentor me. I'm honestly like, I'm ready.
Yes, like she's made a movie before 1 year old. I'm like,
right, like her IMDb page is full. It's a full page. But well, how has the experience been in distribution? Because I know after Sundance, correct me if I'm mistaken, but in April of this year, that's when Vertical became the official distributor for Miss Juneteenth. And I mean, from April to now, like all the different ways that the world has changed. I mean, April was peak global pandemic, and then probably about 2 or 3 weeks before Miss Juneteenth came out, people started knowing what Miss Juneteenth was, you know what I mean? Like, or what Juneteenth was, but in like the midst of the Black Lives Matter movement. And I'm just curious as to how that process has been for you, like with everything shifting.
It was a lot, because I really, you know, I had my initial disappointments just in the COVID part of it, because I was just like, you know, in our conversations with Vertical, I was like, it's really, really important to me that this film goes into the theater in in some kind of way, because like it's such a community-based film. I want the community to have access to it.
Right.
And so when the COVID plans changed, so we had like we were gonna have a small theatrical run anyway, but it was gonna get in the theater, you know. And when the plans changed, you know, I was disappointed, but I was also just like, you know, at the end of the day, I just want the film to be able to reach people, you know, and whether that's just like video on demand or digital, you know, whatever has to be done. I just wanted to get out into the world, and especially get to the folks who, you know, I wanted to be able to see themselves in particular. You know, I wanted the community to be able to connect with it. And so I was really happy about that. And then, you know, as I'm kind of starting to accept those things, then these tragedies start happening again in our community. And it was like, for so many of us, personally devastated and devastating. And you're working through this to get a film out into the world. And, you know, this like, I don't even know how to describe it. You know, I was literally like, you know, Neil and I were keeping each other going, because we would check in with each other and just be like, how are you doing today? You know, and we'd have to deliver something else. And then, how are you doing today? So it was just constantly just trying to keep ourselves going through it. And also, I think one of the things that kept pushing us forward was this idea that, you know, we were in a moment where Black voices were being amplified, you know.
For sure.
And we had another story that was about Black life, and being able to like put that out into the world. And hopefully that story would start opening the doors, would open another door for another story to be told. You know, there's this domino effect. So, you know, I think that's the thing that pushed me forward. I think another thing was, you know, it's always leads back to Zora, but, you know, I want her to have something in the world to be able to look to, you know, when she gets to be a certain age, just the same way that I had, you know, the actual Miss Juneteenth pageant.
Right.
I don't know. I just, it was constantly, you know, pushing ourselves forward to get it done.
No, yeah, I can only imagine. And that leads me to my final question before we open it up. But for your experience with Juneteenth this year, I mean, I can only imagine this weird dissonance. I mean, of course, it was huge because Miss Juneteenth was coming out, but this was kind of the first time in maybe 155 years that the entire, like, the nation observed it as a holiday, but probably was one of the first times in such a long period of time that Fort Worth specifically wasn't celebrating it to the same extent because of everything happening. So how did that feel? Like, what were the vibes like on June 19th?
I mean, it was definitely bittersweet, because you're so, like, Juneteenth is so much about, you know, connecting as a community to commemorate these ancestors who were enslaved and, you know, their freedom, you know, hidden from them.
Right.
You know, and so you just so used to, it was funny because we had a small community screening of the film the day before it came out, just so that people locally could see the film before it went out into the world. And like, you just want to run and hug everybody, but you can't, you know. So I did my best on Juneteenth to try to, you know, create that sense of community. Like, Neil and I are both, you know, on Twitter and have gotten into Twitter now, you know, after the release of the film. So we were able to connect with people through social media like Twitter and Instagram and things like that. And we were literally picking up the phone, calling people, you know, just to connect, you know, because it really is so much about that. But I'm glad to see the awareness of Juneteenth. Like, I don't know if y'all remember this scene in the film where there's a woman that goes up on the stage. She says, "I'm Opal Lee, and, you know, welcome to Miss Juneteenth." I think it's something like that. And she's a 93-year-old woman from Fort Worth, Texas, who has who really, you know, has defined Juneteenth for me.
Wow.
My entire life, pretty much, because she's the one that's pushed Juneteenth forward in Fort Worth and kept it going, you know, and it kept the memory of so many of these ancestors alive. So she's just a wonderful woman and has pushed for Juneteenth to be made a national holiday for so many years, you know. So I'm glad to see the awareness around it. What I do hope is that it's not for just the moment, you know,
for sure.
and that the awareness continues, and you know, people learn something about Juneteenth, you know, from the moment. That's my hope.
Right. That's That's my hope too. I mean, it's amazing that you had the opportunity to share this story on a day where people were actually at home and able to be more aware of this. And fingers crossed it isn't just a phase or anything like that. But well, thank you so much. I'm gonna defer to Nevin, who will start coordinating the Q&A to the
Yay!
audience. Yay!
Oh yeah, so everyone, we had a few questions come in during the conversation, so we'll start with those. But if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, or also you can use the raise hand feature, where you can raise your hand and you can ask the question live. So actually, let's start with a raised hand question. Zavi, do you mind unmuting yourself to ask your question?
Okay, thank you, sir. You can hear me okay?
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi, how you doing? I want to ask Miss Peoples a question, kind of a sensitive question, but first I want to say your film was wonderful. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I wish you much continued success in the future and look forward to your next feature.
Thank you so much.
In your film, there's the bar scene in there with the ladies taking some drinks outside, and the waitress, and she says, these are for the rowdy N-worders outside.
Mm-hmm.
And I was curious, I hear different things, like some people say don't use that word ever. Some filmmakers say it's okay and appropriate when it's a part of the dialogue or that time period or how things were in that place, like they may have been in that bar. And so I want to know how you feel about the use of that in film. And if I do a film that has that dialogue is appropriate in there and I do it, because I'm a white writer, I'm going to catch all get out for it. So I was just curious your thoughts on that. And thank you again for making the wonderful film. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you for watching it. Yeah, I think you probably should catch all get out for it. You know, dialogue to me is about authenticity, and you know, I'm writing from the perspective of a Black woman in the South, and so, you know, I think and I've obviously used it and felt that it was appropriate in this film, but you know, I wouldn't think that it was appropriate for a white writer to use it, but that's my perspective.
All right, good, thank you. I just wanted to hear that. I mean, I feel it's inappropriate for me to use it too, but I was just, you know, I see it in films. Quentin Tarantino certainly does it all the time. And so, you know, I mean,
Yeah,
he's Quentin Tarantino. I'm a nobody, so.
Yeah, and to each their own, just, you know, that's my perspective.
Okay, and can I ask you one more question? The financing, did all the financing come from the Lay people?
Leyline, yes, it did.
Leyline?
Mm-hmm.
It did, okay.
There were some
That's
grants
good.
and other things like that, but Leyline was, they did the primary financing.
Okay, that's a great job, and I want to say too, just one last thing. I hope we get more education on, you know, about Black history in the schools happening, because I was 30 years old before I heard about Juneteenth, and I was around that same period before I saw the ladies from their day, the box, and before I heard about that gentleman, you know, mailing himself to freedom. I was about the same age when I heard about that. So there's definitely a lacking of that history in the school systems. But thank you again for your time, and I really enjoyed the film.
Thank you for watching it. I appreciate that.
All right, we're going to move to a question that Casey asked earlier on in the conversation. She was wondering, what is the best way for us to network so we can advance ourselves in the film industry? What advice can you offer for an amateur and young filmmaker who's trying to make independent films?
What advice would you have? So would you say the last part of that question again? I was trying to see if I see it up here.
Yeah. I guess what general advice would you have for young filmmakers who are trying to get into the independent industry?
You know, Neil is such a better person to ask this question because he's like the king of networking, which means, you know, networking probably could have its own kind of negative connotation, but what he does is create relationship. And like, he's so good about, even in a way that I'm not, you know, picking up the phone and checking on people who say, how are you doing? Or I just want to connect with you. I want to see if we could just sit down or have a conversation on the phone. You know, it used to be before COVID, like, let's have a coffee together, that kind of thing. he's really, really good at that. And I think in an authentic way, you know, that he's really interested and wants to learn about people. And that's something that I've learned from him. And so I've started trying to connect to people more. But I'm also someone that, you know, would rather be in the house with my head down, buried in the computer, you know, like working on the next script. So I think you have to have a balance of that and a combination of that, because, you know, you can have all the relationships in the world, but you still need to have work, you know, in order to be able to get your work out into the world. You have to have work to produce. So I think, you know, it's finding that balance. I also think that, you know, just like we were talking earlier about, you know, like influences and stuff. And I didn't mention this influence earlier, but Gordon Park's segregation series was such a big influence for this film. You know, I think you need to constantly be, you know, taking in other forms of art as well, you know, just like photographs and like a, you know, for me, it was observing life and, you know, and it's film too, you know, we talked about Charles Burnett at length, but and literature for me, I didn't mention that. Like a big part of my journey was reading like the literary greats like Toni Morrison and Alice Walker and obviously Dr. Maya Angelou and, you know, that got me started. So I think you need to find what inspires you and pushes you forward, and then, you know, be connecting with people. And, you know, it was funny because I remember when I started, I was just like, had no contacts or anything, you know, like, how do you do that? But it's just like, and I'm not sure where you are in your journey, but it's just like in film school, you know, I met professors who knew other people and things like that. And then your classmates will, they, you know, eventually they'll go out and work in the world. So you'll meet up with people down the line who have done different things. So, you know, I don't think you take for granted just because someone is not in a specific place, you know, in their career journey, you know, they might be in a different place 5 years down the line. So that's when that whole communication will come into play, you know, staying in contact and creating relationship.
Awesome. We're going to take another question from the raised hands. Letitia, are you all right if I unmute you?
Yeah,
Awesome.
I'm unmuted.
Cool.
Hey, Channing, how are you?
Hi.
Hi. I'm good. I'm gonna praise you just a little bit and get to the question, but I have to acknowledge, as a girl from Texas myself, as a creative person, a creative that spans theater, film, performance, and episodic, I am deeply proud of your work. My father was a competing cowboy, so there were beats in that film that just had me in tears, because the heart of what that is on a very community and very real level is very much represented in your work. And you, I'm so proud of you. It's like I know you. I'm so deeply proud of you. Not in a creepy way, but it moves me.
Cry.
Well, you made me cry, and to the point where I was like so sad that I couldn't, you know, normally I would be in Texas at this time visiting my mom, and so it was both inspiring and very full. And my question for you is around what's next for you. I ask that, you know, as a colleague, but I also ask it, first of all, the POV you're giving that someone else, Saidah, acknowledged, which was awesome, is this is, you know, we live in our communities like anybody else. So whoever's there is there. It's not, this is a story that is not in opposition to gender. It is not in opposition to race. It is just just an interesting type of coming of age, really about mom, right? And so I'm very curious in that wheelhouse, because it sounds like that's your rock, as we would say. Where are you looking to explore next as a filmmaker?
I mean, I'm totally obsessed with this world, so you probably won't stray too far from it next, you know. And I'm also very committed, you know, as I mentioned, to creating more stories that put Black women leads up front, you know. So that'll most likely be the lane that I'm in, you know, next. But I think that there's several, you know, filmmakers, you know, I think about filmmakers in Texas and how they keep coming back to it, you know, just like Richard Linklater and Terrence Malick and all those filmmakers, you know, And so we'll see, but I don't think I'm done with this world. Like I keep trying to capture it as authentically as possible. I did that in my thesis, you know, I'm still here in my feature. So we'll see, but definitely, you know, my mission is to get more Black women leads in front of this camera and like these nuanced, you know, complex roles.
It's beautiful. Thank you so much for your work and
No,
perseverance.
thank you for your comments. You've got me all.
I communicate with you on Twitter, but this is the first time we're like, oh, hey.
Well, we see each other.
Yes, yes, yes.
So great. Yes, thank you for
Wonderful.
being here.
Awesome. We have another question that was written in earlier, but before that's asked, I just want to read this comment from Grace Yu. She wanted to comment on how truthful your film felt and its specificity. And it's such a lovely depiction of the Texas Black community. It's incredibly honest and beautiful in that way. And this is from a fellow sometime Texas and soon to be Texan again, moving back soon.
Grace, you be careful moving back. Because you know COVID is everywhere right now, but that is such a high compliment. And you know, that's the biggest thing for me, was like trying to find the truth in the portrayals, you know. And you know, I talked about being nervous about, you know, the community seeing themselves and being able to portray them with respect, and that was so much a big part of that. So you know, I'm really thankful for your comment. That really means a lot to me. Thank you.
And this next question is from Tanisha. She's wondering, how do you successfully pitch such a specific story? And she's wondering, what approach should you take to really sell it?
You know, Neil and I pitched it together, and the reason that we did, because this was before, like, obviously all the awareness of 2020 started happening about what Juneteenth was. So literally we would start, and either he would explain Juneteenth or I would explain Juneteenth. And then we'd launch into, okay, here's who the story is about, you know? I never think that I was able to completely capture the world of the film in the pitch, to be honest. Like, I described the world, but it was more like, you know, it's Black cowboy culture, and there's like blues music, and there's barbecue and things like that. So there were things that I could talk about that got people excited, but I was never able to, you know, the way that I would have loved to like lay out all the details, because, you know, you do these pitches and they're quick and, you know, you're trying to get people interested. But I did my best. I think another thing about the film was, you know, some people don't get excited, but there's some people that get excited just about, you know, like pageant culture. So we were talking about, you know, this pageant, but we also always explained that it was a Black beauty pageant, but it's really a scholastic beauty pageant. You know, like, I tried to be as honest as I could, you know, because Miss Juneteenth is so much more holistic than just a beauty pageant. You know, it really is creating scholarship for these young Black women who are ancestors of, you know, our slaves who, or enslaved people who got their freedom. I'm sorry, our ancestors were these enslaved people who got our freedom late, you know. So I was always like folding that into, you know, the pitch, just so people understood in particular, you know, what the film was about.
Awesome. We're going to take another raised hand question. Nate, would you mind unmuting yourself?
Yeah, can you guys hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Nate, I can hear you.
Hey, how you doing, Channing? Just want to say thank you again for joining this film. I had the pleasure and privilege, actually, of seeing your Sundance
premiere.
And interestingly enough, I grew up in Texas also.
Yay!
And to add on top of the connections, I grew up in a neighborhood outside of Houston, Texas, that was also home to a high school friend of mine who was an actor in your film by the name of Kendrick. So crazy small world.
So Kendrick Sampson was your high school friend?
I went to high school. We both graduated 2006 from Elkins High School in Missouri City.
Wow.
Crazy connections. And I didn't even know he was in the film because he always keeps his projects under wraps. So it was just a very pleasant surprise to have witnessed that piece of work that both of you got to put together, and that I got to see at Sundance, which was my first visit ever.
Wow.
But I'm gonna go ahead and jump to the question, because I'm sure others wanted to ask questions too. But my question is sort of simple, but feel free to chime in any way you want to. But I'm curious, from your perspective, what kind of stories do you feel are missing today in Black cinema?
I mean, I can't say in particular what stories are missing because I think that they're still being made. I think this film is like one of the examples of like being able to show a very like specific world, about Black life. And so, we're showing another entry, into the catalog to show that I think we're obviously not a monolith and there's so many different perspectives and stories. So, I'm looking forward to seeing what stories come next. At Sundance this year, even in competition, like there were a lot of Black stories being told. So I was like super excited about that. And I just, especially now, like in this moment, like I just hope it's a moment that, opens the doors for more Black stories, and that it's not a just, we talked about it not just being for the moment, but, hopefully that this continues.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Channing.
Thank you. That is so cool. Thanks for your story about going to high school with Kendrick.
Real small. The world just keeps getting smaller.
I know.
Andrea, would you mind unmuting yourself?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you perfect.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to risk a cliche and say thank you for your film.
Thank you.
Loved it. Saw it at Sundance. And I was just curious, like, Turquoise, she was just so respected in the community. She was definitely a leader in the community. Like well, basically anyone causing trouble, like they immediately listened to her. They came to her, even though she was obviously very human, very flawed herself. I was wondering if you think that that kind of leadership is like specific to women, a specific kind of female leadership. Like they have no official title or no official, even an informal leadership position, but she was clearly a pillar, very informally. Do you think that's kind of like inherent to what many women do in the community?
Yeah, I mean, well, it was for me, and not just, in the community. Like Turquoise is really, she really is a combination of my mother and my grandmother and my aunts and, women in my family and women in the community I grew up with who were leaders, who would just take up the mantle and get things done, And so I think for me, it was just in my perspective as a filmmaker, that's just who women are and what they do. So I take it, I guess I've taken it for granted until you just brought this question up just now.
It just seems like men need an official title or something. Sorry, I didn't need to interrupt.
Yeah, it's interesting because the women in my family have had,
no offense to the
guys. They've had many titles and things like that, official titles in all different walks of life. But, I've just seen women be able to just get up and get things done, whether they had the title or not. They were just like, we're doing it. So that's where Turquoise comes from. And I think doing it with a sense of like grace and dignity. And that was important to me to be able to convey.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for asking that question and having that comment.
So we have a few more minutes if anybody has any final questions. Now's the time to ask them. Otherwise, I'll pass it back over to Saidah to ask some final questions. Yeah, go ahead, Andrea.
I guess this is we're obviously seeing a big change, and from the outside looking in, it seems like it might stick this time because people of color and seem to be starting their own companies and not being so dependent on like these gatekeepers. So that's my perspective. I was wondering if you think this massive change we're going to see is frankly going to last. I'm hoping it does. I'm an optimist, but I'm wondering if you agree.
I'm hopeful too. You know, we shall see. You know, I think that, you know, for me, like I was, you know, determination was such a big part of like getting this film made. Like I was going to make it no matter what. And I think there's so many, you know, Black creators that I can think of right now that are doing the same. You know, they're just determined to get their stories out into the world. And, you know, I think that we're doing that, and there's still other hurdles you have to climb, you know, in financing and distribution and marketing and things like that, you know. So I hope that this is lasting, sustained change, but I think that we're going to keep getting the stories out no matter what, and, you know, hoping that they reach folks, you know. We shall see, but I'm hopeful too, you know, but I'm also a realist. But I'm not going to stop making stories, that's for sure.
Do you like think that there's one particular thing that's the biggest obstacle? Do you think?
You know, there's not like one particular thing for me, just because, you know, like I said, this is my first feature, so I'm just navigating like the journey from beginning to end, you know, and there's like lots of obstacles along the way that you can encounter. But I think, you know, we're in the place, it's interesting to see what kind of stories will come out of this moment as well, because I think artists have always been the ones to, you know, speak to, you know, how life is and how life could be, you know, and I think that we're going to have to continue to force ourselves to create no matter what, you know. I think as artists, that's just part of us. So, you know, there are all kinds of hurdles. There are financial hurdles, you know, there are distribution hurdles. But I think there's also people that, you know, in our case have found the film and supported it and amplified it, you know, no matter what. And I think people can take that for granted. You know, I think our voices are what needs to be heard, you know, just people hopping on social media and saying, you need to see this movie, you need to see, you know, or talking to their friends. Like that's such a big part of like getting these films out into the world, even when they don't have like a gazillion dollars in marketing budgets and things like that. You know, even if they're not in theaters all across the nation, which there's nobody in theaters, we're in drive-ins right now, which is interesting. But, you know, people have championed the film in the way, like I wish like people are podcasting about the film, you know, they're just taking it upon themselves to spread the word. I wish I could remember, you know, some of the podcasts that I've heard, but I've heard really good ones, you know, just creating awareness. So, you know, I have to thank you all for spreading the word as well, but that's a big part of like keeping these films being made and, you know, keeping them out into the world. Like we have to amplify.
Thank you.
Awesome. Going to pass it over to Saidah for some final questions.
Okay, well, thank you, beautiful people, for asking such amazing questions. And thank you again to Channing for this very fruitful conversation. I'm going to ask two questions, one that we normally ask everybody during this time and one that might benefit the audience. But the first question is how you've been coping in the middle of this quarantine, and if it's just how that's been for you, and just making sure everything's, you know, checking in. And then the second question is, as we're all at home, I know you'd mentioned Killer of Sheep and My Brother's Wedding, but are there any films that you would recommend people watching, or any films even that inspired you, or both?
So first question, how am I coping at home? You know, I have my little almost 2-year-old on my shoulders most of the time.
Shout out to Zora.
You know, shout out to Zora. So, you know, it's been joyful to get a lot of time with her, but, you know, it's also, I mean, we're all, you know, trying to figure out how to survive in this world and trying to figure things out, you know, and I'm definitely no different. I'm connecting and having a lot of Zoom conversations and, you know, trying to keep writing as well and getting up early and writing late and all that good stuff. But, you know, I've heard a lot of creators talk about it being a hard time, you know, for COVID and also the tragedies this nation is navigating. being able to focus and write and things like that. So I just say to people, what I'm saying to myself is we just have to do the best we can. Like I started writing, really, I would just write things down, little pieces of paper and, notebooks, and they may not have complete stories at the moment, but they were little moments of inspiration. So if people can at least do that, I think that that's helpful.
Right.
As far as films, like I talked about Killer Sheep, I talked about My Brother's Wedding. Has everybody seen Julie Dash's Daughters of the Dust? Okay, most people have seen that. I love Jonathan Demme, everything really, but I really like Rachel Getting Married. I went back recently and watched Eve's Bayou again from Cassie Lemons. I love Richard Linklater, Boyhood in particular. I'm a Gina Prince Bythewood fan. So Love and Basketball is 20 years old, I think. Love it so much. I also love Beyond the Lights. I don't know if people, yes, it's so good. I don't know if y'all saw, do y'all remember Sotsy by Gavin Hood? I really loved that film. Okay, I'm putting
notes. Taking all notes. What did you say it was? It's called Gavin Hood?
Sotsy by Gavin Hood. Hopefully I'm spelling things right because my spelling is, but I'll put it in the chat box.
Okay. I love this.
Oh, did I do something privately? I'm going to send this to everybody. I'm sorry, since it's like one person. I'm sorry. Send chat to everyone. I'm still learning these. Okay.
Yeah, Zooms are, amazing.
Yes, but if anybody has recommendations for me, please put them in the chat box. Because I have films I need to catch up on. I'm going to butcher Almodovar's name, but I love Pedro Almodovar. Did I butcher his name? So Voltaire was one of my films that I screenshot for this film, and it's about a mother and a daughter, much different than this film, obviously. But I just love Penelope Cruz is in that one. I just love their bond. And then, does anybody remember a 1974 film by John Barry called Claudine? Did anybody see Claudine? Okay, because it was funny. Claudine was in my head for this film, and then I got on the Zoom with the reviewer, and he's like, "This film reminds me so much of Claudine," and I was like, "Get out of my head," So please see Claudine if you haven't. It's like really great, to me at least. I'm trying to put in some more of the films that I had.
Amazing. And these are some that I had. Ignore the Gavin Hood spelling. That's not even.
Oh my goodness. Some of these I have, what have I? Okay. Oh, those were, okay. I was about to say, what have I not seen here? Okay. Anybody got any other recommendations for me?
I love how this is IFP. Our next venture is going to be our movie watching club, and we're just going to monthly watch different films and analyze all of them.
I'm sending this. Why am I sending this to? I'm sending this private to Andrea. I meant to send it to everybody. Oh, Little Woods is so great. I've seen it.
If you click where it says Andrea's name and change that to everyone in the meeting, you should be able to send it to everyone.
Okay, so I could change it. Oh, okay, got it.
Amazing.
Just trying to see if anybody has any other recommendations here. Okay.
La Mala Educación. Love it. Awesome. Okay, well, thank you again so much. And now I'm gonna add these all to my Letterboxd watch list and just.
If y'all start your movie club, please invite me back so I can watch.
Yes, of course, anytime. Amazing, amazing. Okay, well, I'll defer back to Nevin to wrap it all up.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming in and talking with Channing. It's just a really wonderful thing that we're able to connect with people in this weird, strange way during this time. So thank you so much for giving your time and talking with us about your incredible movie, which to everyone who hasn't seen it yet, Go see it. It's so great.
Yeah.
I hope this has convinced you if you haven't watched it yet. So yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, Saidah, for moderating. Did a wonderful job.
Social media stuff down for you guys. Here, let me put my social media since I'm on social media now.
Yay.
Instagram, Peoples. Please connect with me on there. And then let me put the Juneteenth movie one too, because we're in drive-ins in places, and so we update what drive-ins that is in now.
Oh yes.
So that's kind of cool. I haven't been able to get to one since we had one at our community screening, but I haven't been able to like get to like the proper one in the cities or whatever. So if y'all are in one of these cities where the drive-ins are, please go.
Yeah, I know we had some comments in the chat of people saying, I wish I could have seen this on the big screen. So that's awesome. You're able to put it into drive-throughs.
I know, it's so cool. Well, we'll see what happens. Like I saw something about like Walmart opening drive-ins, and like all these people are opening drive-ins now. So we'll see what happens. We're going to be a drive-in nation.
I see it.
Fast.
True.
Thank you all so much. This has been so wonderful. And thanks everybody for like having your camera on and stuff. It's so nice to be able to connect with people. It's so great.
Yeah, so fun. Amazing. Well, have a good night, everyone. And
Good night.
talk soon.
Hello, everyone.
Bye.
Night, thank you.